Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 24 of Shonen Shorts, where today we'll be going over the July 19th issue of Weekly Shonen Jump. And this week I read Underdoctor, How Formula, Cannon Master, and Hunter x Hunter, obviously. So, for Underdoctor this week, it was a continuation of the last chapter, obviously, since we aren't starting a new little arc here. And we see as Shuli has to perform surgery on Haji. And at first, it's going kind of well. Haji's instructing him through it. We see as Haji mentions how Shuli cannot use anesthesia on him because he's allergic to it. And so we see that as Shuli begins to perform surgery, but ultimately he ends up rupturing Haji's intercostal artery, which leads to some bleeding, and ultimately Shuli has to do the extraction of the bullet by himself because Haji ends up passing out. But we see ultimately as it ends up going all well, and Haji ends up waking up thanking Shuli and all of that. And we see how Shuli now knows why people are doctors, because though they have to deal with so much stress, the idea of knowing that you healed someone and you did good for the world just is overpowering as compared to that. So we see this, and then we see as Haji mentioned about how one of the Hawkins Six, the older brother, has been shot and is bleeding badly, and that's why he had told Shuli not to use anesthesia on him because he needed to use it on this guy. So we see then as they ultimately end up agreeing to take the surgery after, I guess, a lot of pushing and prodding from their siblings who love them, obviously. And so we see that they're healed, and then the Hawkins Six are bagged up because they are criminals. But yeah, so that's where that chapter of Underdoctor ends. Then for Hull Formula, we see as the qualifying rounds for Oita or Autopolis begin to commence, or not begin to commence, but begin to play out, and what you kind of see as how the qualifying matches work is kind of described. How the qualifying, like I said, oh my gosh, the qualifying and how you place higher, because you got to get higher lap times to get higher in the position for the actual race once it begins, and we see as Miharu ultimately ends up starting off very quickly. Now we also see that he has quite the rival here in Hinokura, because he is direly needing a win. He direly wants it. But Miharu is prepared. He's been practicing for this. And we see as right out the gate, he is driving very riskily, yet with skill. Because at one point he almost goes into the grass, but he only barely scrapes it and gets going. And we see as Kyogoku, who is sitting with Hakura, it's Haruka, yeah. I sitting with Haruka and Haruka's babysitter, who seems to have something for Miharu, and we just see as they're talking, and Kyogoku is speaking, or at least mentioning, how this area, or this specific track of Autopolis, has 3 specific difficult turns. I believe there were the first turn, which Miharu took pretty well, the 8th turn, and the 11th turn. And so we kind of see as Miharu continues to drive, and he's dealing well with the turns. And then at one point it gets to a turn where he appears to be accelerating way too quickly. However, what he ends up pulling out is an insane move. He ends up drifting his Formula 1 car for 0.1 seconds, which leads, it's not a 0.1 second drift, but it's a 0.1, so he drifted, and it only led to 0.1 seconds of deacceleration. Or deceleration, sorry. And this then allowed him to continue at an immense pace, phenomenal speed here. And so that's kind of where that chapter ends, just seeing him hit that amazing drift and then continue along like nothing crazy happened, even though that's one of the most difficult turns in the entire map, or entire track. So I guess we'll see as Miharu continues the qualifying rounds here in the next chapter, and then see as possibly the Autopolis race begins, the big race that we've been waiting to see for a couple of chapters now. So, then for Cannon Master. Cannon Master, great chapter this week, because we get to see as Ruga and Baharat end up fighting, and we get the parameters of the battle mentioned again. We see as Baharat mentions how if he wins, then Ruga will have to quit this mission that they plan on going on against the demon, and the the Regolith, and if Ruga wins, then Ur has to be off the mission. So, or I guess just out of commission for the time being. But yeah, so we see as this fight begins, and everyone's kind of betting their money on Ruga, because Ruga is a master at almost every type of combat. And we see as he uses these sand abilities matched with these chain attacks, and they're really cool. They are going crazy. But Baharat is able to dodge all of these with relative ease, and he's just kind of doing it all crazy style. And Urin's mentioning he does this through, I guess, analyzing the breathing which someone releases within the wind, because he's a wind-based Slaylith. So we see this kind of goes about, and then at one point he ends up using his flute to deflect one of Ruga's attacks. And we see this kind of continues, but ultimately Ruga is able to get his flute. But what Baharat was doing here was he was using it as bait. So he is then able to get Ruga down, and Ruga's like, whoa, I was not expecting that. This dude really reminds me of Ryo, who, if you remember from last chapter, is a commander. So this is actually kind of cool to know. And we also see that Ruga mentions about how Baharat has kind of like wasted his potential by being in the West because there's not much of anything crazy there, but Baharat just enjoys it there, so that's why he's there, or at least that's why we can presume that he's there. But yeah, so we get a lot of really cool stuff here. Also, we get introduced to this type of armor that's used for sparring specifically because it allows people to feel the damage of attacks, but it doesn't allow any fatal blows. So yeah, that was just a great chapter all around. The fight was sick, and seeing Baharat is actually a competent Slayelith was super cool. And knowing that he is more powerful than what rank he has been deemed and all of that. So, then for chapter 414 of Hunter x Hunter. Now, this chapter kind of starts off with us seeing as one of Benjamin's men is going about and just sliming everyone. And we get another kind of description of why Benjamin, underwent martial law and put martial law down and all of that. And we see that as kind of a big part that ends this little segment of the chapter is the man who was killing everyone is ultimately confronted by one of Benjamin's loyal men. And we see a bit of a confrontation prepared to happen here. But yeah, so the meat and potatoes of this chapter is us seeing as Kurapika is strategizing. So we see as he's talking with the 14th prince's mother and assistant and all of that. We see they're discussing, and this goes through a lot of stuff. We see a long line of dialogue, like very wordy, but it ultimately ends up coming down to the idea of, what is happening here is we got to get Wobble. We got to figure out how to save Wobble because Wobble is our main goal of protection. However, the main threat to Wobble is not just the succession battle, because if they're not on the boat, then the succession battle is of no worry to them. However, if they are on the boat, then they have two big problems, and that is the curse from beyond Netero's child, whoever is targeting Wobble, and then also the succession battle. Now, what they're hoping is the case is that Wobble is in fact not on the boat, because then, if it is, since Beyond Netero is under the Hunter Associate's control, they can speak with Beyond about the possibility of who is supposed to curse Wobble, and then either ensure that that person does not die and therefore activate the curse on Wobble, or find Wobble and then exorcise Wobble so that the curse has no effect on him, or on her, sorry. Because Wobble is mentioned to be a she in this chapter, so I actually remembered it. But yeah, so we kind of see this plays out. And we see then, as Kurapika is kind of hoping that Wobble is in fact not on the boat. And so he mentions about how if Wobble is in fact not on the boat, he's talking with Wobble's mother, obviously. He mentions about how, if she is not on the boat, then I have people to send who I trust with my life more than myself to protect Wobble and ensure that nothing bad happens to her. And we get to see these two people, and it's Gon Freese and Killua Zoldyck. And we then see as kind of Kurapika speaks about them a little bit more. But yeah, so I pray that we get to see more with Killua and Gon here, because I'm really excited to see them again. It's been a very long time since we've seen either of these two. So I hope that they start to play a more of an integral role in the, Dark Continent Succession Battle, or Succession War, whatever you call it, arc of Hunter x Hunter, because I really enjoy both of them, especially Killua. And Gon, now that he's kind of went through his character arc. But yeah, so I'm just really ready to see where this plays out, and I'm really ready to see if Wobble is in fact on the ship or not, and how they're going to have to go about doing this, and what they're going to have to, and I guess what way they're going to have to interact with Beyond Netero, because Beyond is kind of a wild card here. Like, we don't really know what he wants, and we don't really know what he is. So, yeah, I'm just really ready to see how all this plays out, and I know we have technically 6 chapters left for sure, and I'm pretty certain Togashi is working on some more, so we just gotta wait and see what is within these. But yeah, that's all there really was for the July 19th issue of Weekly Shonen Jump, and that's all we have for episode 24 of Shonen Shorts, so thank you very much for watching.